Greetings, friendlies. Welcome to Dharma PhD, conversations about the science, philosophy, and culture of mindfulness and secular Buddhism. I'm your host, Shannon M. Whitaker, joined once again by my fabulous co-host, Jeff Street. Welcome, Jeff.
Hello. It's a pleasure to be here.
How are you?
I'm very well. I've had a wonderful day.
Excellent.
And I'm looking forward to an interesting conversation.
Oh, well, my goodness. Maybe we can find one for you later.
All right.
But where's the drum roll? Oh, I turned it down. Hang on. Is it this one? There it is.
There it is. What are we talking about today?
Last episode, we finished the 6-part series, right? So a new topic, completely new topic.
Completely new, through our mostly your powers of perseverance and determination, we've arrived here at a fresh new frontier.
At a fresh new frontier. So I have started a course, which of course you know about, Jeff. It's called the Committed Practitioner Course.
CBP?
No, Committed Practitioner Program.
Yep. Otherwise it'd be CPC.
Right.
But no, CBP.
CBP. It is hosted by Bodhi College. It is an 18-month program. So there's going to be a couple more podcasts on this. Mm-hmm. The way the program is set up is we have some modules in person. So I amazingly traveled in December. Mm-hmm. For the first time
in forever,
I was able to travel, and I actually got to see other people in person.
Other practitioners in person.
Other practitioners in person. Yeah, it was
Is that
crazy.
what CPP stand for? Committed Practitioners in Person.
That's really funny, actually. Yeah, I'm going to totally tell them about that. The structure of the course is that we have in-person modules, and also there is homework to do. So we're going to be talking about the first month of homework. They call them continuing investigations.
Are you going to get me to help you with your homework? Is that what's happening
yes, please.
here?
I would like you to help me with my homework. Yeah.
I see what's happening.
Yeah. You, our callers or our listeners, write in all the time and say how charming and clever you are. So who better to help me with my homework?
I'm happy to do it. So what's the assignment? So
the first assignment for the month of January, they had us read a sutta.
I haven't done the reading for this homework.
It's totally fine. You haven't. I don't think you've prepared for any of these podcasts, and they've gone just fine.
That's correct.
So why would we change something that's working so well? It's about one of the suttas, and I thought I would give, for those listeners who aren't familiar with what a sutta is, I thought I'd give a quick structure of the Pali Canon, what is a sutta?
Yeah, how does a sutta figure into the overall? Mm-hmm.
What is a sutta?
Okay.
So there are a lot of Buddhisms. There's Japanese Buddhism, and there's Chinese Buddhism, and there's Korean Buddhism, and there's Thai Buddhism, and Sri Lankan Buddhism, and there's this interesting Mélange Buddhism that's happening in the West. One of those Buddhisms uses as their primary, what's the word for it? Like their religious texts?
Their foundational text, maybe?
Their foundational text.
Their holy scripture, you would call it, if it was like a Catholic
right, exactly.
or a Judeo-Christian thing.
Yeah. That is called the Pali Canon.
Okay. And it's not shared amongst all of these flavors?
Right, it's not shared. It's different. They have different canons in different places. There's some that kind of all use the same one, but there's like the Sinhalese version of the Pali Canon, and then there's...
It sounds kind of similar to the Christian situation, because the Jews have a certain portion of the Catholic Bible, the Old Testament. Jewish people use that. Mm-hmm. And different flavors, use different bits. Mm-hmm. And then the Catholics have the Old Testament and the New Testament. Mm-hmm. And then various other Christian denominations have various versions, and they'll add some books and subtract some books. And it sounds like a pretty similar situation.
Yes, it's similar in that there's a lot of different traditions that use different versions of the same kind of thing.
Okay.
In the same way that Jesus of Nazareth did not write anything down. He just was a rad guy. Gautama, same with Socrates. These guys didn't write anything down. They were just super rad.
They're movers and shakers. Mm-hmm.
And then people memorized what they said and wrote them down at various distances from those times. Okay. So the Pali Canon, again, is we'll call them scriptural texts for one of these traditions. Typically, we would say the Theravadan. There's a little variation, but primarily, we'll say Theravadan Buddhists use the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is divided into 3 sections. They're called baskets. The first basket is sort of texts for the mendicants, what we would now call monks and nuns, but I like the word mendicant better. It's actually what the word bhikkhu and bhikkhuni means, so mendicants.
Yeah.
The second basket is teachings of Gautama, things that Gautama said. And the third basket is philosophy, and that was actually done later, so that's not stuff that Gautama said. It's things that the tradition have philosophized about over
developed
time.
since then. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So the first one is for the mendicants.
Yeah.
Second one is things that Gautama said.
Yeah.
And the last one is philosophy that's developed since Gautama lived.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is a really superficial designation.
Sure.
Gautama said stuff in the first one. Sometimes it's not clear why a sutta is in one and not the other because it's good for both.
So these baskets are composed of suttas.
Well, not quite. Not yet.
We'll get there.
Yes. So there's the 3 baskets. So we're going to look at basket number 2, the teachings, the sayings of Gautama.
Sayings of Gautama. Okay.
Yeah. Inside of that basket, there are collections, Nikayas, they're called. And within those Nikayas, there are multiple suttas. So, you know, these big books that I have?
Yeah. She's pointing to the bookshelf here. It's a dangerous looking book.
Solid collection. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the Nikayas inside of the second basket.
I see. Okay. How many, like roughly speaking, how many Nikayas, how many feet of bookshelf are we talking about?
Several feet of bookshelf.
Several feet of bookshelf.
Yeah. I don't know how many actually.
Okay, for the
basket, there's several books.
So you're talking, if you want to have all of this text together, you're going to need like a reasonable size bookcase.
I would like a library. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Sounds fine. Okay. And then which of these Nikayas would trigger the secret door that causes the bookcase to move aside?
I would have to say probably the Dhammapada as translated by Gil Fronsdal.
Okay. Stay tuned, listeners, for a future podcast in which we discuss.
So
we've got our baskets.
Yes.
We've got our Nikayas,
right.
which is like a volume.
Collection. Mm-hmm.
Collection.
Yep.
Okay.
And it's a collection of suttas.
And then inside of that, we have suttas.
Yes.
Okay.
So we're going to be looking at one of these many, many, many suttas.
How big is a sutta, like in terms of number of words?
Yeah, it can be 1 page or it can be 30 pages. I think this one is 15-ish pages. I don't actually remember. The Nikayas, one of them is called the long discourses, and then the middle length discourses. And that's where we're going to be is the Majjhima Nikāya, which means middle length or middle, Majjhima, Nikāya's collection, the collection of middle length discourses.
Okay. Got it.
Okay.
So we're in the Theravadan tradition.
Yes.
Theravadan Pali Canon.
Yes.
We're in the basket, which is the sayings of Gautama.
Yes.
We're in the Nikāya of the middle length.
Yes.
Suttas.
Yeah.
Got it.
The Majjhima Nikāya. Well done.
Okay. And what's the name of the sutta that we're doing?
Crucially, the number is often used because the names are difficult. MN26, so Majjhima Nikāya 26, the Ariyapariyesana Sutta.
Okay. What does it mean?
The translations for the title are Noble Quest or Noble Search.
Okay.
Which feels a little silly to me. Anyway, the translations of the title are Noble Quest or Noble Search.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I am not always good at, one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you about this is because I am not always great at reading these suttas. They are religious, right?
Okay.
The Venerable Ananda, the Holy One.
A lot of superfluous adjectives.
Yeah, there's a lot of adjectives and a lot of reverence, a lot of languaging like the noble search, the noble and ignoble searches, which is not a thing that I often walk around saying to people.
I'm going on a noble errand to the noble search at the grocery store for...
Probably going to be an ignoble search, let's be honest, right? Like I'm probably going on an ignoble search to the grocery store. So I often have some resistance to reading these things. And I was trying to understand, okay, how am I going to engage with this material? You know, I'm in this course, I'm in an 18-month course. This is the very first homework. How do I engage with this in a way that is skillful?
I've had a lot of Catholic education. I went to a Catholic school all the way from the beginning of school up through university, undergrad, and have waded through a number of religious texts in my time.
Yeah. And yeah. I really didn't engage with that stuff much. And so I struggle with it.
Let's be clear. I struggle with it too.
Okay, great.
And that entire time.
Excellent.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, okay, so this is the first piece of homework they've given us. There must be something in here. The teachers at Bodhi College, whom I respect and who I'm putting my trust in for 18 months, said, this is the first thing we want you to read.
Okay.
Whatever's in here is so important that this is the thing we want to set the ground for the remainder of your course. So I did the thing I always do, which is I did this deep dive, this very analytical reading. Because I don't read Pali very well yet, I took 5 translations and I broke them out sentence by sentence.
You went big.
And I compared them across a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. I'll put a link to that in the show notes so that I could understand the mechanics and, oh, well, this person translated the word this way and this person translated the word this way. But what I found from that was it still wasn't speaking to me. I'm trusting these teachers. I'm putting my faith in them for 18 months. They have decided that there's something in here that's so important that we need to start with this. This is the ground.
Right.
Okay. So what is it? What is that thing?
Let me tell you. Sit back and let me elucidate.
You're going to elucidate?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Great. I'm glad.
So I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. No, I thought maybe you had something.
I haven't. I know only
after 8 years.
name.
I should be able to read your hyperbole, but I still don't. I
know
really
only the name of this sutta. And
do you know the name?
It's
the name in English. Okay.
I know I couldn't tell you the Pali, and I couldn't remember the number for you, but it's like an ignoble search or a noble search. Oops. Is that what it talks about? The difference between noble and ignoble things that can be searched for, or methods of searching?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So what I did was I read back through it and I said, okay, what is the most fundamental piece of information in here? What is the kicker? Why?
Yeah.
Instead of reading it for this deep dive content, instead of teasing apart translations, what is the point?
What's the kernel?
Yeah. Judson Brewer says, so what? He brings the so what question to everything, which I really love. So what? So what? Why am I reading this?
Yeah.
And what I think is really important here, the name of the sutta is the Noble Search. Noble Search doesn't resonate with me. So what kind of languaging might I use instead? Some of the Bodhi College teachers, including John Peacock, use the term ennobling. They would say the ennobling search. So it's a search that ennobles you.
Ennobles the searcher?
Yes. So
adds nobility to the searcher.
Yeah, okay. The act of searching adds nobility to the searcher.
Okay.
But even that language is a little weird. My Dharma friends would totally get it.
Sure.
but talking with normal people, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. And so I thought, what about the word orienting? What am I orienting towards? Which felt a little more idiomatic, felt a little more natural to me to talk about.
I'm not sure I understand the word orienting. Would you tell me a little more about it?
What is my life oriented towards? Am I oriented towards acquisitions and wealth?
Noble things, for example?
Yeah. Am I oriented towards acquisitions? Am I oriented towards wealth acquisition? Am I oriented towards Lamborghini acquisition?
Personal relationships.
Or am I oriented towards relationships?
Creating art.
Yeah.
Adding beauty to the world.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And as soon as I started thinking about it in that frame, what am I oriented towards? Where's my bandwidth going? Where am I? Your
time, your energy.
Yeah, where's my time and my energy going? My time and my attention, maybe even more to use Buddhist-y language. What is my life oriented towards? So that made a lot of sense. As you know, every year I do this sort of annual, it's not a review, it's not last year's, but it's like going forward.
It's a reckoning. It's a planning of the next year.
Yeah. I look at my values, and then from my values, I build my goals, I make a plan. And
is this sutta a way does it give some tools that you might use to evaluate the things that you've put in your plan for the next year and like examine them and say, are they adding nobility to me? Is that what the sutta is about?
Not exactly.
Okay.
The sutta talks about what not to do as opposed to what to do. I mean, it does say you should be oriented towards nibbana, but nibbana/nirvana, depending on how you pronounce it, is a tricky word because we haven't pinned down what that word means. Depending on who you ask, there's different things that word means. So saying like you should be oriented towards nirvana.
Thanks. Not useful.
Is kind of like saying you should be oriented towards flourishing. Okay.
Yeah. Got it.
What it actually does, it says what not to orient towards.
Okay.
So we'll get to that in just a minute.
Okay.
But I wanted to talk about the importance, I think, of this orientation, because I see that as being, when I ask myself, why are the teachers of Bodhi College having me read this sutta? They're saying, look, you need to make sure your life is oriented in the right direction.
And then more advanced things.
And then the other stuff, right? If we keep spending our time pointing it towards things that aren't helping us flourish, then this other stuff isn't going to come along. You said something I thought was genius the other night. We were talking about, we had done our last year's annual financial review. And you said something. You said that you weren't feeling that the amount of money spent was commensurate with the level of personal fulfillment. You felt like you're spending money, or we were spending money, but you weren't feeling the joy, an equal amount of joy from that. I thought that was a really wise insight because you were recognizing that like I'm spending resources. Let's just put money off the table, resources, money, time, attention, putting resources into stuff that isn't fulfilling, isn't making us happy. And when we do that, that is Gautama's version of the quote unquote ignoble search. That's what happens when we're oriented towards things that aren't ultimately fulfilling. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Yeah.
I think this is really interesting because it's not our fault. We have a culture, a society that encourages us to be oriented towards acquisition of goods.
There are, to put it more generally, there are a number of things that want to influence our orientation.
Yeah.
This sutta, for example, wants to influence it, but also the advertising industry behind consumer goods.
Yeah.
Lamborghinis in particular. They're doing what they can.
I bring up Lamborghinis because I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast.
Oh,
but
please do. I think listeners would enjoy more Lamborghini content.
More Lamborghini
on this
content.
podcast. Yep.
So when I was a kid, I had a big poster in my room. If you saw it, you'd know the genre, but I'm sure it was photoshopped. It was a house on a cliff looking out onto the ocean. And I think there were 6 different Lamborghinis parked out front, a red one, a black one, a white one, whatever. Yeah. And a helicopter pad with a helicopter on it and whatever.
Sounds like Malibu to me.
And it said, the one who dies with the most toys wins. Mm-hmm. And that's how my life was oriented. My
you
life.
had this poster in your room every day. You would look at it several times.
Yeah. I thought, okay, the thing to do is to acquire these goods and then I will be happy.
You'll win.
I'll win. And winning will make me, and that's another thing. You win. And then if you win, you're happy. But we know people. I know people personally, but also our culture knows there are plenty of famous rich people who commit suicide because they're miserable. It is clearly not simply the acquisition of goods, fame, fortune, whatever.
Followers, yeah.
little thumbs ups that leads to fulfillment.
Just a tip to the listeners. We don't have this poster in our house currently. Although it lives in your memory.
Absolutely.
Like this articulation of that value was so vivid to you. You're moving away from it. You're rejecting it in some way, but still, it's with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we met in Los Angeles, for me, it was fast cars, fast motorcycles, fast boys, rooftop cocktails. That was what winning looked like. And it was incredibly dangerous to me physically and harmful to my mental health. I was not mentally well in that experience. And those things are still very dear to my heart.
I will say, listeners, that I met Shannon. She was driving a red Ducati motorcycle wearing black leathers, and it was a vivid image. And in that image stays with me today as well. And I'm still enjoying it.
Excellent. I'm so glad to hear it. I still love those things, but I'm no longer holding those things up as the pinnacle of well-being, of the pinnacle of winning, of the goal of my life. It's actually something that they talk about in this sutta. It's okay to enjoy the objects in the world. Some people think that Buddhism or the teachings of Gautama will tell you have to go live in a cave and you have to give up everything and asceticism and whatever. Actually, it says in here, the problem is not the objects. I want to find the exact languaging. Hang on a second. The problem is not the things themselves. The problem is one is, quote, tied to these things, infatuated with them, and utterly committed to them, right? That's where we get into a problem where we hold these objects, these things, as the highest good, as the thing we have to dedicate our lives to, right? So you were asking earlier, do they talk about it, the noble search and the ignoble search, or what I would say orientation, a skillful orientation versus an unskillful? It's interesting because he actually starts off saying spouses and children. And some people really take issue with that. They're like, wait a minute, you mean I can't love my family? And that's not what it's saying at all. It's saying that you can't hold your family as a thing that is supposed to make you happy. Right? Like we see parents do this with kids, right? The child is supposed to fulfill the unlived dreams of the parent.
Mm-hmm. No pressure. no pressure, kids.
No pressure. You got to make mommy happy, like we see this all the time. I know I have a lot of friends who have this particular psychological upbringing. Or you see people who get married because the other person is supposed to make them happy.
Or the other person maybe has a quality that they themselves wish they had.
Yeah. Right. Every fairy tale ends, they got married and then they lived happily ever after. And you are an amazing, wonderful person. So being my partner, I should never have a moment of unhappiness if that is in fact the case, because I got the right guy. but it's not just about you. And I can't expect you to make me happy. That's a great way to ruin a relationship, frankly.
Yeah, it's like, as partners, maybe you can help each other, but it's not simply by being partners. It's more of an active.
Yeah, you can't expect somebody else to fix, to make you happy. It's not, they don't even have that power. They don't have that power. And we're taught that. The fairy tale ends, they got married and they lived happily ever after. And so if you can just get married, everything's going to be fine.
Right. If a person selling wedding goods or services is pitching this message, then be suspicious.
Right. So it starts off with spouses and children, and then it moves into slaves. That's a problem. We definitely shouldn't be trying to get slaves. But then these other things, sheep, pigs, elephants, the trappings of high society, things that show wealth, which today would be fashion, clothes, Lamborghinis.
That's two Lamborghini mentions for those listeners counting at home. Is this going to become a drinking game, this podcast?
Sure, we have some tea right over here. We can have a little sip of
the
water.
only podcast that has a tea drinking game associated with it.
They do talk about gold and silver, the acquisition of gold and silver. But again, it's not about having these things. It doesn't say if you have gold and silver, if you have elephants, then that's a problem. Although I think if we had an elephant, it would in fact.
It would indicate that we're in a class of society that's unseen.
In the Pacific Northwest.
Pacific Northwest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the problem is not the elephant or the gold and silver. The problem is when we are tied to these things, when we are infatuated with them, when we are utterly committed to them, when we believe that these things can give us happiness. That's where the problem comes in.
Can I make a point about this?
Sure.
So, or I guess let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So it seems like there are a couple aspects to having. So I have a bicycle here that I'm enjoying.
Yes.
But there are a couple of aspects to it. One aspect is that this bicycle is made by a prestigious brand. Mm-hmm. And so one way that I could be enjoying it is I could tell other people, I have a bicycle made by so-and-so. Mm-hmm. And then they might have respect for me.
Yes.
They might think a certain thing about me as a result.
Yes.
And another aspect is that this bicycle is quite a capable bicycle.
Yeah.
It works well. Mm-hmm. The experience of riding it is good.
Yes.
And I enjoy that. I have a camera that is quite a capable camera as well. And using it is a pleasure.
Yeah.
Riding a motorcycle that works well is a pleasure. These things give pleasure to use. It seems like I'm on board with the idea that having things with prestigious name brands on them and then wanting that to convey a social status to us.
Yeah.
That seems like a thing that people commonly do.
Yes.
I have done. And that seems like a problematic thing. Mm-hmm. It seems like a different issue to have a tool in some ways that works well and to take pleasure in that, in the using of it, in the creating of things with it. That seems less problematic to me. Mm-hmm. Are we speaking about both of those here? Is it useful in this discussion to differentiate those, or is this kind of beside the point?
I think it's all on a spectrum. For me, one of the things about the teachings of Gautama that is so important is this middle way, right? Finding this balance. So it's not, should I never have a bicycle, or should I only have a rusty, crappy bicycle that barely works? Or should I have the best possible bicycle? It's recognizing what are you giving up? What of your liberty? What of your liberation are you giving up?
Another point along this line is there's a graph of cost versus utility. And for many things, that's not a linear thing. Like as cost goes up, utility does not increase correspondingly. Oftentimes it'll go up in jumps. Mm-hmm. And so like for this bicycle, for example, some parts of it are like the top quality available, but then the other parts that I didn't need to be the top quality, I just got the cheap one.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of some parts are very nice that I really need to be that way, and then other parts are like, just whatever. So maybe this is something towards the idea of a middle way. Like think about how you're going to use the thing, and get the thing that's right for what you're going to be doing with it.
Yeah. I would also say it's not just about cost. It's also about resources, right? So one of the problems in our society, I'm about to say a thing that is on the political agenda. I'm not trying to make a political statement, but this is a thing that has been politicized in our country, and this is the opinion that I have. Welcome to my podcast. We are destroying our environment through consumerism. That is a view that I hold. And so when we are constantly buying new things, we might recognize that some types of things, some types of materials, for example, might be better to use or less good to use because of their impact on the environment. So it's not just about cost. That's one thing I want to say, is recognizing that it's not just about bottom line dollar cost. It's about what is the effect? Okay, last podcast episode, we talked about dependent origination. We talked about how adapachayata, paticca samuppada, we talked about how things are interconnected.
Yeah.
So my decision to purchase an item or not purchase that item has effects outside of that individual purchase and its effects on my financial status. It has ripple effects, the people who created it, whether or not I buy it from a private reseller versus from a big box store, whether...
What's going to happen to that item after you're done using it?
Right. Am I going to throw... Is it an item that can be reused or not, or that can be repaired or not? There's so much more that goes into it than cost. So I just want to caution against using cost as a metric.
Okay. Good point.
Yeah. But to go back to your question, yes, I think it's okay to get... It's not saying you can't have nice things. It's just saying pay attention to where one is oriented. Is one's life dedicated towards having 6 Lamborghinis and a house and a helicopter? And is that really making you happy? Or is that making a person happy or not? And I would argue in many cases not.
I was talking to a colleague at work the other day who was just moved from somewhere else to the city that we're in now. And he still has, back at his previous city, a garage full of stuff that he's not using. And so here's an example of having a bunch of stuff around that you're not using. It's having a cost in terms of money. It's having a cost in terms of weighing on you. He's having to spend time figuring out what to do with this thing.
Yeah. And our culture, the point I was making earlier that I think is really important, is our culture nudges us. There's all kinds of, again, this idea of dependent origination, causes and conditions, creating an environment in which we are oriented one way or another. All around us, our culture is nudging us in the direction of acquisition. Buy more things, make more money so you can buy more things, nicer things. So there's this constant pressure to perform in this way. And that can be dangerous to individuals and globally to the environment. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It makes sense. Yeah. So we have this sutta.
Yeah.
Gives us a list of things to avoid if we want to be doing some noble searching.
Yeah, but I think that list is not the thing that's important.
Oh, what's the thing that's important?
The important thing is noticing what we're being oriented towards.
Okay.
That's why I wasn't even necessarily going to talk about what the sutta says we should be orienting towards, because their lives were less complicated.
Fine, but pick a thing. Know that you're picking a thing to be oriented towards.
Yeah.
And pick it carefully.
Exactly. Pick it carefully. Be aware, be cognizant of what you're orienting towards, because we are always laying down neural pathways. We are always running these neural pathways, and we can be either creating new ones that are more skillful, or we can be running through those same ruts that are less skillful, or we can be creating new ones that are also unskillful, right? There's a lot of things we can do. Every time when we look at brain function, what we see is that every choice or lack of choice that we make lays down a pattern. So we need to be careful what those are.
We're always forming our future habits.
Yes, that is a great way to phrase it. We are always forming our future habits. When we were talking about intentionally orienting towards something, we were talking about how we live in a society that orients us towards acquisition of goods. One thing I wanted to say was, we are hedonic beings. I've talked about this hedonic tone, this Vedana.
Yeah.
We have this evolutionary history of this hedonic response. Things are pleasant, things are unpleasant. And we really respond to that. And that has been a powerful survival mechanism. It's in the sea slug. It goes all the way back to single-celled amoebas.
Well, it's certainly true for me today.
Right. Yeah. It's absolutely a part of our biology. And so we need to recognize how much of what I'm doing is just driven by hedonic tone. How much of this is wise decision-making, and how much of it is just about my hedonic response to the world. And because we are hedonic beings, not only is our society orienting us towards acquisition, but we are biologically oriented towards pleasure, towards acquiring things that give us immediate pleasure too, not long-term pleasure, right? It's not about broccoli. It's about buying that box of Russell Stover's cream chocolates that's on sale and eating all of them right now.
They're very good.
I'm just going to,
Although we did buy broccoli today first.
That's true. We did buy, but only because we didn't know that the chocolates were on sale. I would have bought them first as well.
Well, we can only look at the record, and that's what happened.
It's availability heuristic, I think. I think the thing I just wanted to talk about was this idea that this sutta, MN26, Majjhima Nikāya 26, along with a lot of other information, like many Dharma talks, there's a lot of stuff in this sutta. I'll put a link in the show notes. Please feel free to go and take a look at it. But
will you also link to your awesome spreadsheet?
Sure, I'll link to my awesome spreadsheet. But the point is that we need, as you said, to be aware of what we are oriented towards, to pay attention to what we're pointing towards. You had asked, what am I, Shannon, doing? And I've been doing the same sort of plan since 2008 in January.
You have the same structure for planning. Your particular goals, orientation has changed a little bit, but your structure.
Yeah, the structure is the same. In January, I sit down and I figure out my values for the year, and then I build goals from that, and then I have a plan that comes out of that. And for me, that's been really helpful. Some people say like, oh, that's way too goal-oriented or whatever. But for me, having those values in place gives me a really powerful structure and a way to orient my life. And helps me to figure out, where to point my bandwidth. In fact, in my to-do list, when I'm being particularly strict, if I'm going to put something in my to-do list, I have to tag it with one of my values.
Link it back to one. Okay.
It has to go back to a value. And if it's not, then I need to seriously ask myself, why is this thing going in my to-do list if it is not oriented towards one of my values?
Okay.
I think that some Dhamma people might eschew technology and structure. Some people are like, I just want to be free about how I make my decisions.
For those people, let me invite you to consider that Buddhism has a lot of lists involved. And so if you want like any parallels there between these various to-do list technologies and Buddhism, that might be it.
Thank you. Thank you for the backup on that one. This has been a structure that has just been really helpful for me in orienting towards away from Lamborghinis. Or away from Lamborghini acquisition.
Fourth mention.
Yeah. Towards liberty and towards flourishing and towards being a better human being and taking care of the planet. It's allowed me to change in this way. I came across this great quote by Bill Gates, I think 2 days ago. It says, "I have been struck by how important measurement is to improving the human condition. You can achieve incredible progress if you set a clear goal and find a measure that will drive progress toward that goal." And I think that's so true, that we have to be careful because sometimes we can pick the wrong measure.
Sure.
In public education, for example, the thing we're measuring is whether or not you can take a test. So we're teaching kids how to take tests. We're teaching kids how to memorize things. We're teaching teachers how to teach kids how to memorize things. We're not teaching critical skills. So we have failed because we've chosen the wrong measurement. One thing that I did for this year, for 2022, is, as we talked about, I do this values and then I make goals from the values. One of the values was aesthetics. And one of the goals, when I first created it, the goal was, in 1 year, I would like our apartment to look good while remaining turnkey. So I didn't want to have 35 houseplants because I needed it to be.
Turnkey means we can go traveling, walk away.
Exactly.
There's nothing here requires regular maintenance.
Right, because our house in Baltimore, we had 35 houseplants and that took a lot of work.
They were awesome.
They were awesome. So the first version, in 1 year, I would like our apartment to look good. But when I was thinking about that didn't feel like a value that felt like flourishing. That felt like go to CB2 and spend $2,000 and buy a bunch of nice things for the apartment. But that didn't quite feel like...
Do it. You could imagine what that would be like.
Yeah.
And you could say, okay, imagine that we had different stuff. Would that be? And you're saying, no, that's not what I'm after exactly. You wouldn't object?
Would not object.
You like all the things at CB2?
I do like all the things at CB2. If CB2 would like to sponsor this podcast, please call immediately.
Get in touch.
Super fine with that. But it didn't feel like a flourishing value to me.
A little too much like parking a Lamborghini in your house.
Yeah, it felt like Lamborghini acquisition.
Fifth mention.
So I had a long conversation with a friend of mine who is an artist and so is really into aesthetics in the Dhamma Thanks again, Scott, if you're listening. And what we came to over talking for a while is I said, okay, I know what I want this goal to be. So the goal changed from the old version, I would like our apartment to look good, to I would like to feel good about how our apartment looks.
Okay.
So you see that difference, right? It's a shift in orientation. Yes, I want to, the thing is the same, kind of. I want to feel good.
But the measurement.
The thing I'm measuring is my sensitivity to aesthetic, not how expensive are my pillows.
Because one thing is maybe even a little more measurable than the other. If you say, I like the apartment to look good, there's no scale.
That's a false statement. I can show you Instagram photos.
But again, it comes back to the way you would actually be doing that is you would say, I feel a certain way about this Instagram photo, and that is a feeling I would like to have about our apartment.
I'm going to replicate that here.
Are these things identical? And so then by reframing it, you've really said that in a more overt sort of way.
And I can work on something else. I don't have to work on what pillows we have. I can work on my own aesthetic sensibility. I can orient myself to saying, I love the view from our balcony. I love our hummingbirds that are outside. I love...
Let's create a way to enjoy those things.
Right. I love the fact that we don't have to have the heater on because we have this tiny little condo on the south side of a building that is warmed by the sun. Yeah. I can be more intentional about what I am orienting myself towards. So it's no longer about, again, something else making me happy, buying things to make the apartment look nice. It's about Shannon recognizing, why don't I appreciate this place? We have a nicer house than Versailles, technically, just from indoor plumbing, right?
Big factor. Big factor.
So why
also,
am
our mirrors are higher quality.
Why am I dissatisfied? Looking at my own dissatisfaction. This, I would like our apartment to look good, doesn't say, Shannon, what is going on with your dissatisfaction? Whereas I would like to feel good about how our apartment looks says, okay, what's going on with me? How can I reorient?
One good example of this might be the hummingbird feeder. For Christmas, you received a hummingbird feeder.
It's so great.
It's so great.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
And it's a thing that has increased your enjoyment of the apartment quite a bit and of the view from the balcony. Yeah, you've put it in a place on the balcony so that when you're sitting at your computer working on editing this podcast, just over the top of the monitor, just if you look over there out towards the water, you can see the hummingbird feeder and the hummingbirds. Yep. Right out there. And that's a small expenditure. It's a physically small thing, but it changes your experience in quite a big way. Yep. On a daily basis. It gets you involved in the process of creating hummingbird juice, putting it out there, bringing the thing in at night, cleaning it out, refilling it. Yeah. Yeah. It changes your experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. What do you think? How has this landed for you?
Yeah, thanks for pointing out the idea that we're constantly creating our habits.
Yeah, it's scary.
It's scary. I was reading a thing the other day that pointed out that if you think about the way you experience your life, we tend to be oriented to big things. Do I have a Lamborghini or not?
Sixth mention.
Thank you. And that the presence of Lamborghinis in one's life perhaps impacts your life less than the way you greet your partner when you or they return to the house each day. Yeah. Like we make a point of doing that. And recently that's a thing I've been focusing on. I've noticed that when I come home, you make a point of stopping what you're doing, coming over, or if you can't stop, I'll make a point of coming over to you. Mm-hmm. And we touch each other, we say hello. Things like that have a big impact on our experience of the world. It's evidence that we're oriented towards relationships with other people, cultivating those relationships. Yeah. Yeah, and paying attention to these things changes our experience of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Changes our role in the world. Yeah. Changes the experience other people have of us. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for being here.
It's a pleasure, as always.
Thanks so much, listeners. As usual, you can find us at dharmaphd.com. Check out the show notes for some links, and may you be well.
I'm gonna do a little burp here.
Great. You want to tell me a joke?
Knock, knock.
Who's there?
I was going to do the interrupting cow one, but I forgot to interrupt you.
Moo!
Thanks. Well, stay tuned, listeners, to our other podcast.
Shannon learns German.
Shannon and Jeff explore the etymology of German words.
Wow, that's not going to have any followers at all.
Nope. But the nice thing about podcasts is you don't require any followers to make a podcast. You can just do it.
Yeah. Welcome to Dharma PhD.
We don't have to ask permission of anyone to do this podcast. Here
Thank
we
goodness.
are, blazing forward relentlessly.